I want to do now is I want to find a point close to the middle of the face as possible. And I can see that that is just fractionally off vertical. From that point at the top of her head, I know that it's that sort of angle to the corner of her eye. From the point of her chin, it's actually on virtually the same angle. In fact, the 3 points are pretty much in line. The corner of the sort of point of her eyebrow to there. So we now have a point here, roughly in the middle of this rectangle, which I can be pretty confident is in the right place, because we have effectively triangulated it off 4 points. The beauty of having a really accurate contour is once you've got that in, you've effectively got a very reliable way of referencing any other point on her head and face. Any point you're looking at will correspond to 4 different points to give you a very accurate reference of where it is. What you're trying to do is learn how to make all these calculations subconsciously eventually. Make a mark and then measure it, test to see whether you were right or not. Now let's deal with the point on this side of the contour, which is at 45 degrees this way. As I mark that point on her forehead, I'm obviously thinking about it in terms of its relationship to these 2 nearest reference points. I would say it's going to be roughly there. Measured it in terms of 45 degrees to this point. I now want to check it in terms of the angle from her eyebrow, and that's obviously closest to vertical. I now do the same to the top of her head, and now I'm visualising how close it is to 45 degrees, and it's just steeper than 45 degrees. And I'm just going to put in as much information as I need to know what point I'm describing. Very important at an early stage to describe the shape which contains all the features. It's surprisingly small. First of all, I'm going to draw a line through both pupils. Just sit both pupils on top of my pencil. On one side, my pencil intersects the back of the ear, just about here, and on the other side of the face, just about on this low point here. Now, I want to know where the outside corner of this eye is. So you can see that my pencil intersects the contour at that point there, and as luck would have it, right on the point of the chin. I wouldn't draw this line in normally, but I'm going to put it in so that we can see what this shape is, and more importantly how small it is. Okay, we'll do the same thing from the back of the eye, the other eye. Again with one eye closed, and I can see that if I extend that line, it intersects the contour just above the brow ridge, right through the middle of the chin. We recognise people from the big shapes. It's not the detail in a face that makes them recognisable, it's the shape, the general shape. It's the posture and the overall gesture that makes that person recognisable. It's important for you to understand the principles of perspective so you can make them work for you, not against you. Thinking of the skull as a rectangular block allows you to tilt and turn it in any direction and have a perfectly clear idea about how it has affected perspective and foreshortening. If the model is seen at an oblique angle, then parallel lines will converge at your eye level, and the closer you are to the subject, the more quickly, the more dramatically they will converge. The far side of a face is narrower than the near side. It really is. Try it with a box or a piece of paper. Divide it in half and then hold it at an oblique angle. You'll be surprised. It's not much further away, but it is narrower. An important aspect of perspective is foreshortening. A very useful way of transferring shapes you see onto the paper without letting the brain convert them back into shapes it can understand is to make use of negative shapes. An exercise which demonstrates this very well is the exercise with the pane of glass, where you place the pane of glass on top of your hand and draw the contour lines around the form. This helps to reinforce the sense of foreshortening and give direction to unfamiliar foreshortened shapes. The picture plane is a very simple but very important concept. Imagine the picture plane as a sheet of glass between you and what you're drawing. Now close one eye and imagine everything you see is squashed flat onto the back of the glass. This translates all the perspective and foreshortening you can see into flat two-dimensional shapes that can be copied onto your paper. It takes some practice to see foreshortened objects as flat shapes, and it always helps to close one eye. But once it clicks, you'll find drawing anything 100 times easier. So what checks and counter checks can we use? You can check the negative shapes of the background. What shape is the section of wall you can see behind your model's head, because one side of that shape is obviously described by the contour of the model's head, but it's sometimes much easier to see when you're looking at the shape of the background as opposed to the positive shape of the contour of the head. Another thing you can refer to is the straight lines which you drew at the beginning. These straight lines will help to determine the shape of the lines and forms around them by gauging the amount the line curves away from the straight line. You can always mentally refer back to the rules of proportion, what you'd expect a face to be. Running through these checks encourages you to look at certain relationships that you may not have specifically looked at before. If you find yourself scribbling, which tends to happen when you stop concentrating, just slow everything down. Instead of hatching with a sort of fast rhythm, just make individual strokes, and you'll find that suddenly you're making a much prettier mark.